The Catholic Echo podcast is a weekly podcast discussing what's happening now in the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Bishop David Bonner and members of our diocesan community discuss your burning spiritual questions. The Catholic Echo podcast is produced by the Communications Department of the Diocese of Youngstown with support from the Annual Diocesan Appeal. It can be found on catholicecho.org, Facebook, and YouTube. Your host is Collin Vogt.
Hello, my name is Collin Vogt, and I am your host today. Today I'm joined by Paulina Montaldo. Paulina is a teacher of broadcast journalism at the Ursuline School, and she also has a YouTube channel called Somos Youngstown, which helps to shine a light on the Hispanic community here in Youngstown, bringing some eyes to the businesses and to the community that's here in Youngstown. So thank you, Paulina, for being with us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, Paulina, before we get into your work at the Ursuline School and with your YouTube channel, can you just give us a little bit of background about yourself, how you came to be here in Youngstown, how you get into teaching, that sort of thing?
I was born in Santiago, Chile. My senior year in high school, I came to Newcastle, Pennsylvania as an exchange student. I lived with an American family for a year. Then I went back home. I went to college. I earned a bachelor's degree in journalism, and I work always as a TV reporter. I used to come to Newcastle on vacation to visit my American mom and dad. Still in contact with them, and I still call them mom and dad. And in 2000, they asked me if I wanted to work for their company here in Newcastle. So we applied for a worker's visa. And in 2001, I came to work for them. And that's how I got here to the area. So I became a resident, a citizen, and I was looking first for a journalism job. I was not lucky with that, so I went back to school. I went to Geneva College in Beaver Falls, and I got a master's degree in higher education administration with a concentration in college teaching. And that's how I went into teaching.
Fascinating. Okay, so what drew you to get a degree in journalism in the first place?
Well, I always wanted to be a journalist. My father was a journalist. My grandfather was a journalist. So I think since I remember, I wanted to be a journalist.
And your experience as an exchange student, what was it like coming to the U.S. for the first time?
Well, it was kind of frightening at the beginning. At that time, there was no internet at the resources that we have now.
Yeah.
So to call home, it was very expensive. So that was once a month. And of course, when I moved here, like, where is Newcastle, Pennsylvania? We couldn't find any information about it. Pittsburgh was our reference. It was kind of like intimidating at the beginning, plus the lack of the English language. Mm-hmm. Even though I went to school, I mean, we had English classes, but it's a whole different story to move to the country and speak the language all the time.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's an experience that I recommend to anyone studying abroad. It opens doors, change your mindset. I think it's a wonderful experience.
Yeah. Fantastic. And was the school that you were going to, was that also a Catholic school when you did your exchange program?
Well, I mean, I attended a Catholic school at home. Here I came to Neshannock High School in PA, which it was a public school.
So what brought you then from Pennsylvania over to Youngstown?
I applied to Ursuline, and I really wanted to teach at a Catholic school. So once in a while, I check the diocese page looking for an opening. Mm-hmm. And finally, that opening happened, and I applied right away.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like this job is for me. They didn't call me right away. It probably took like over a month. Everything went well, and I've been teaching there since 2014.
Well, congratulations on over a decade at Ursuline then as well. I can tell you, when I applied for my job here, it took about a month for me to hear back as well. So I think that's just the diocese life. It takes a little while to hear back. But when you do hear back, it's great. So
exactly, yes.
As, someone who grew up Catholic and everything, what do you find is so powerful about Catholic education? What does it bring that you don't get in a public education?
Well, I feel like the spiritual part of the education, the teaching of faith, moral values, service, I feel like it's very important. Serving others without expecting anything in return. I mean, all those teachings, I think that promotes kindness, empathy, and a sense of purpose. And I feel like brings a lot of joy and satisfaction.
Growing up, I went to a Catholic elementary school, and then I went to a public junior high, and then I went to a Catholic high school. And having that kind of switching back and forth made it clear to me what benefit there was to going to a Catholic school. And it's like you say, with the emphasis on spirituality, I mean, of course, that's obvious that that would be one of the benefits of going to a Catholic school, but it's so important because the way that I see it, we're meant to be spiritual beings. We're meant to give worship to something and to have that kind of integrated with our whole life. When you just go to public school, I think there's obviously great teachers at public schools, and a lot of people receive an amazing education at public schools for sure. But there's just that integrating it with something of higher purpose is just so valuable. That's at least what I've found in my experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yes.
Working with students at Ursuline School, what do you find inspiring about working with those students? What is it that really just brings you to work every day?
Well, I think that the little details, and like just that we're talking about, like caring about others, doing little things or big things for others without expecting anything in return.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, I don't know, it's like, can I help you with anything? Or you're carrying your books, or you see a classmate in the hallway that just dropped something. And even though you know that you might be late to class, you still take the time to help, to pick up the books for that other student, or to do something about someone, or trying to do service outside of the school because you feel like that brings you satisfaction. And I think that those things make you go back every single day. They're so worth it. I mean, I think that we have wonderful students. Just makes me happy. I just wish school started a little late because I like to sleep in just like the students do. But other than that, I mean, brings me joy to be there every day. And then I think that not everybody can say that about their job. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think being able to find that joy and purpose in what you're doing is such a gift. Absolutely. And I'm curious about if you can give us any insight about the experience of students today. You know, it feels like our culture today is just becoming increasingly hostile to faith in general and Christianity in particular. That being someone who lives your faith openly or brings that faith into everything that you do is sort of looked down upon or treated as someone who's backwards or something like that. And I just want to get your perspective on the next generation of these young men and women of faith. What's their experience going into an increasingly secular world? What challenges are they facing, and how are they bringing their faith into that?
Well, I think that they are facing a lot of challenges because it's a world that moves sometimes way too fast, questions everything. And sometimes, especially for teenagers in high school, to be cool, let's say, it's important to them. And sometimes to follow the rules, to be respectful, is not necessarily seen as cool, especially with so much social media. But I feel that when faith is strong, and we can see that in many families, and I think that's what it is. I mean, the family and the school working together to make that faith strong. I feel like once they have learned, understand, and be strong with their faith, they are ready to go into the world, and it really is on them to pursue that faith or not. And I feel like most of them do. And something else that I should say about Ursuline, like not everybody is a Catholic student at the school, but they are respectful. We pray every single class, and students, if they're not Catholic, they stand up. They respect that. That is great.
Oh, that's beautiful. I want to ask you more about, you say the family and school working together. What are some
Yes.
ways that families and the school kind of collaborate right now at Ursuline? What do you see on that regard?
For example, when we have a prayer service or a mass at the school and families come to be with the students there, or if we have a mission trip, parents support that, and they send their children to go somewhere else and work hard and serve a community, even if it's a local community in the United States or overseas. Parents even participate on those mission trips. So I think that is supporting what the school does. So it's a work together.
So on that, what are some other ways that families can help to support the mission at Ursuline?
I think that going to mass, it is important. I see that not every family does, but sometimes the families even, let's say, the students want to receive more Catholic education than the parents are willing to give them. Let's say there are some families, they are not Catholic, and the students, their child, want to become a Catholic. And they talked to the teachers and said, you know what, my family is not Catholic, but I want to get the sacrament. And you know what? The families support that.
Mm-hmm.
We have some families that are not Catholics and their children become Catholic and they support that.
Yeah.
And I think that's great.
I just became a father a few months ago. My baby is 6 months old. So,
Oh,
well,
congratulations.
thank you very much. I can't necessarily speak to having a teenage child or anything like that. God help me when she reaches that age. But I kind of understand the pressure and the complexity of the situation of being a parent now. And I'm curious as to your opinion about how do you find the right balance between you don't want to be overly pushy, you don't want to be overbearing, you don't want to drive them away by being too strict and too demanding, that sort of thing, but you also don't want it to come across as something that's not important. How do you, with some of the students that you've interacted with, how can parents find that balance? What do you think is the right approach?
You mean like not being so pushy about going to mass and that kind of thing?
Yeah, you don't want to be so pushy that it drives them away, but you don't want to make it like you don't care either.
Yes. You know what? I really think that is a thing. I mean, it's something about age. In my own experience, let's say my son always went to like CCD and received all the sacraments. And once he went to college, he started to go to mass and then he quit going to mass because they were like things to do with the friends. I felt like I gave him all the tools. And I'm happy to say that now that he's a father, he felt like his children should be raised under Catholic faith.
Yeah.
So now he's the one that takes his children to church, to CCD. They have received their sacraments. So again, I feel like there is so much you can do, but then it's up to them.
And that's scary sometimes as a parent, is like, you want to let them do it, but you're just nervous about the outcome. I mean, for me at this point, that's just about like letting my daughter kind of crawl 5 feet over to mom. It's like I want to help her and like, push her feet, but then I'm like, she has to learn to do it herself. It's so hard. And that's just some tiny little thing like crawling, as opposed to instilling them with faith.
And of course it's hard because I think regardless the age, they always will be your son, your daughter. You're always going to be concerned about if they're doing good. I mean, if they got home after a trip or even, you're always, that's, I think, is part of being a parent, a good parent.
Well, God bless all the parents out there. We all need it. All right. Well, thank you for your insights into Catholic education. I also wanted to ask you about your YouTube channel, Somos Youngstown. Can you just tell me a little bit about how that got started?
Well, I always, as I say, when I moved here, I wanted to do something with journalism and it didn't work out that way. it was always in my mind to do something about it. So finally, in October of last year, I decided to create this show that, like you said, is called Somos Youngstown.
Mm-hmm.
And basically a show in Spanish where I want to highlight the contributions of the Hispanic community in the Mahoning Valley, Trumbull area. And also I share some of the services that the community offers to the Hispanic community here. Mm-hmm. So it's both. I think it's a little over 6 months now, but I'm very pleased with it. I'm very happy, and I have gotten a very good feedback.
What are some of the stories that you've found in the community that were particularly inspiring to you?
Well, I have people of all backgrounds and different countries. But for example, I found someone who works for NASA in Cleveland.
Wow.
And he was in charge of, it was called like the Sapphire Project, that is in charge of containing the fire when the rocket launches.
Wow.
And it was so successful that they based 3 other projects based on his project. I think that was fascinating. I had someone in Campbell here that is a truck driver, but his hobby is to build small trucks. Such a good job that people from all over the United States, like big firms from all over the United States, hire him to do like small replicas. And those replicas is like, they work. I mean, you
really?
can fit inside. Yeah, and they are so nice. They are beautiful trucks.
Yeah.
And they have everything, light, smoke, everything. And then the Navarro family, for example, that have donated over $1 million on scholarships for Americans and Hispanics, I mean, for any student at YSU. And just like a month ago, they donated more money towards the music school to provide music teachers for the Youngstown school system.
Wow.
So since that Hispanic doing the community, I just want to highlight the positive about Hispanics.
That's amazing. Those are some amazing stories. How do you find these amazing people? I mean, how do you connect with them?
You know what? I read everything. I not only search the internet, but like I read like the small newspapers, the boards at the grocery store, at church, wherever I go. I always like to read, so that's how I search and find stories. That's the idea, to find stories that people didn't know about.
Yeah. That's your journalism right there coming through.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Yes.
Have you brought in any of your students from the high school in broadcast journalism to kind of be a part of the YouTube channel or anything like that?
No, because I feel like not being my high school students, but I have 2 students that have graduated from Ursuline. One, actually, I'm doing her story this week, and she is a TV reporter in Buffalo for the local news. And then I have another student that graduated probably like 4 years ago. He's pursuing a career, I don't know exactly what the name is, but like to produce movies. Okay?
Right, okay, gotcha. Like filmmaking.
Well, exactly, yes, thank you. He's in Spain right now studying abroad, and he contacted me and he said he will be back in the summer. He will be happy to do something for Somos Youngstown and help out, which I thought that is great. I would love to have my students.
Oh, that's amazing. That's such a beautiful thing that you're doing. And thank you for bringing your talents to Ursuline and for helping to just shed a light on all the wonderful Hispanic people that are part of our Catholic community. Is there anything that you'd like to spotlight right now to let people know about, or to ways that they can get involved with helping out with Catholic education here in Youngstown, or anything like that?
I mean, I'm open doors. Anybody that would like to share their stories in Spanish for my AP Spanish students at Ursuline, they're welcome to. If you have a story that I think I can highlight, Somos Youngstown, or any nonprofit event or anything that I can help with, I'll be happy to. Please contact me at Ursuline or through Somos Youngstown.
All right. Well, that sounds perfect. Thank you, Paulina, once again for being with us today. It was an absolute pleasure. And thank you for all that you do for our diocese and for the city of Youngstown.
Thank you very much.
Up next, we have an interview with Stephen Jones, our Diocesan Superintendent for Catholic Schools. But first, a quick word from our sponsors.
It's time for Patron Saints of the Diocese of Youngstown with your Bishop, David J. Bonner.
St. George is also known as the Great Martyr. He was born to a Christian family in the year 280 and moved to Palestine to join the army of Diocletian. He is famous for saving a girl by slaying a dragon in a lake, which some scholars believe may have been a crocodile. In the year 303, he responded to the Roman Emperor's edict of persecution against Christians by publicly proclaiming his faith. His relics can be venerated in a basilica of Lida, now called Lode. He is patron saint of England, Palestine, soldiers, scouts, archers, and is invoked for the prevention of plague, leprosy, and snake bites. He is also patron of St. George Parish in Lisbon. His feast day is April 23rd, so happy feast of St. George to our friends in Lisbon. St. George, pray for us.
Welcome back to the Catholic Echo podcast. Our next guest is Stephen Jones, the superintendent of our Catholic schools here in the Diocese of Youngstown. Stephen, thank you for being with us.
I'm happy to be here.
Stephen became the superintendent last year in April of 2024. Stephen, can you tell us a little bit about your personal background and how you got into education?
Sure. I can remember exactly the moment when I knew I was going to end up in education. I was a sophomore in college down at Houston Baptist University, near where I grew up. And a philosophy professor gave this incredible lecture. And I just had this epiphany sitting out in the auditorium when I thought, I want to give interesting lectures someday too. And that's how I got started thinking about education. But before I knew what I wanted to teach, I knew I wanted to teach. One thing led to another, and through graduate school and marriage, I ended up for a while as a professor of the social sciences, a couple of different schools, and then moved into Catholic school teaching and administration a little bit later in my career.
So you went to a Baptist college. Were you raised Baptist?
I was, yeah. I'm an adult convert to Catholicism. Houston Baptist University is now Houston Christian University. They made that change a few years ago. After graduating HBU, that would have been in, about 93, I guess. I went off to Duke Divinity School in North Carolina. Still doing primarily academic work. I never thought I was headed into vocational ministry. And it was at Duke that I started reading Catholic moral theology, some church-state stuff that had been done by Catholic thinkers, and really began to feel pulled to the church. It took my wife and I quite a long time to make that jump. But then once we did, we both feed in all the way. We now both work for the church. Our kids have all gone to Catholic schools, everything.
Wow, amazing. So whenabouts did you jump over?
Oh, it's been 15, 16 years now. I left the professorate after we became Catholic. I stayed where I was for about a year, maybe two. My wife and I, we really knew that we wanted our kids in a Catholic school. But that wasn't possible where I was, either financially or really there just wasn't one anywhere around us. So I started looking around. I ended up becoming the academic dean at a Catholic high school down in South Carolina, and kind of worked my way up from there, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So you said that you kind of started reading some moral philosophers or moral theologians in the Catholic Church. Do you feel like your kind of love for that academic environment, or, like you said, you were really drawn to your professor's lectures, do you feel like that played a big part in what brought you to Catholicism?
It certainly did, in maybe kind of an indirect route. I'm very grateful, very thankful for my Protestant upbringing. My family's very faithful in their churches. Mm-hmm. I love that. I love having grown up that way. I would say, though, that early on, as I began to really kind of make the Christian faith my own, I was troubled by the unique emphasis on certain ways of thinking. And I knew that the Christian faith had to be more broad and more historically rich than what I was being presented with. It was reading about, like in the 1800s, 1900s, the experience of Catholics here in America. And at that time, they were a very persecuted minority. That was when I really started to see the richness of the Catholic vision, reading some of their defense of what they were doing. People questioned whether they could be good Americans and all this kind of stuff. And as I was reading that, I just kept saying, they're not just making up responses on the fly. They're deeply rooted in Catholic history and a Catholic understanding of what it means to be a person. And that's what really sort of piqued my interest. I couldn't point to a single thing that I read where I went, okay, that's it.
Yes.
I will tell you a little bit of a side note here. The college I was teaching at was Presbyterian.
Okay.
Very orthodox, very faithful.
Yeah.
They asked me to teach a class on courtship and marriage, kind of a, intro class to marriage and family life. And I decided to do a lecture on birth control. And I remember, I'm reading how, what you have to do to present a lecture. I remember going home and telling my wife, I think the Catholic Church might be right on this, because in the Protestant world, it was non-issue. And now we have 5 kids. So
yeah.
Careful what you read.
Yeah. Well, something clicked, I suppose. I always love to hear what brought people to, become Catholic. My wife last year converted and became Catholic. She was raised in the Uniting Church of Australia, which is totally random, but her father was Catholic, and really she was more brought up with Catholic traditions, so she always related to being Catholic. And then when we met and started dating, we both felt really called to bring our faith back into the focus of our lives. And, I was raised Catholic, but I still consider that to be a conversion myself. I think that Christianity in general, and really the Catholic faith, is one of conversion. Everyone has to make it their own at some point in their life. Now, about the education side of it, so you always knew that you wanted to give lectures and be that guiding light for students, but now you're the superintendent. So I'm curious if that was always something that you thought you would moving towards, you wanted that position, or is it something that you kind of feel God called you to take a slightly different role in education? How did that happen?
Yeah, it was a definite sense of calling. As I said, we really wanted to raise our kids in a Catholic school. My wife and I are both proud and grateful graduates from public schools, but we wanted something different for our kids given when we became Catholic. So I had the good fortune, we had mutual friends kind of down in South Carolina, and one of them hired me to be their academic dean. And this is at a very highly performing school. Greenville, South Carolina is a wonderful area. A lot of things happening. And I loved that time there, but I began to realize after about 11 years, I began to say, the church has resources that the world needs. And I wanted to try to do this somewhere else for a while. Had no real connection to Ohio. Interestingly, I was born in Columbus, but I have no memory of living there. We moved. We moved down to Texas. I mean, I've got some aunts and uncles left in Ohio, but nobody I was in real contact with or anything. The Diocese of Youngstown had an opening, and I sent off a letter to Monsignor Zura, and here I am, I would say that I got into administration. When you're in the academic world, not everybody in that world, God bless them, but not everybody has a certain skill set and a willingness to do administrative work. And I guess I did, or at least some people thought that I did. And so I kind of got bumped up along simply because I was willing to do that kind of work.
I think it's similar to, the priesthood, where it's not necessarily, who's the most accomplished priest will become a bishop, but it's the people who have very high level administrative skill set, good communicators, good project managers, that sort of thing, are identified as someone who can take that leadership role as well. And I imagine it's similar with academic. You might have some brilliant people that are amazing professors, but they sort of fall apart when they have to not be professors and be...
You're exactly right. It starts with you end up getting asked to chair some committees and things like that. And because you just, executive functioning type stuff. And then pretty soon you look behind you and realize, I haven't been in the classroom in 3 years.
Yeah.
I always was teaching at least one class because I like to keep my hands in with the students. And I like to, you can't talk to teachers about what they need and what they're experiencing if you're not doing it yourself. So until I became the superintendent here, because I'm not connected to a particular school, I always taught at least one class.
So you always had that kind of connection to the classroom as well. Do you find that kind of helps you keep just aware of what's going on in the classroom, how students are faring, and that sort of thing. Does that help make you a better administrator?
I think it does. Trends change, educational tools change. When I started teaching, I remember the first email I ever received. I couldn't tell you what it said, but I remember sitting down in front of my computer and this guy saying, now click on this button, click on this button.
Yeah.
And then suddenly there were letters addressed to me, right? As technology, for instance, changes, and it has ramifications for the classroom, for instance, artificial intelligence. Well, it's helpful if you're in the classroom, because then when the teachers are saying, how do we use these new tools? Or here's the challenges and opportunities that they're presenting, I've got a little bit of that firsthand experience with some of that too.
Yeah. Let's get into that a little bit more. What are some of the responsibilities of a superintendent? Is it about the curriculum, administration? I know we kind of talked about administration already, a bit of both. I always know that when I was in school, we were afraid of the superintendent, even though we had no idea who that person was or had ever even seen him. We were afraid of ever having the superintendent's coming. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm nervous now, actually, really.
I don't think I even knew who the superintendent was when I was in school. I would say that, my office, the Office of Catholic Schools, has a curriculum director, and then there's a lot of compliance with state laws and needs that accreditors put on schools and diocese systems of schools, things like that. Most of my job at this point is, kind of keep things moving, make sure that everybody's doing what they need to do. I tell people all the time, the real work of Catholic education does not take place in my office. It takes place in classrooms all over the diocese. My job is to make sure that the principals have what they need so they can make sure that the teachers have what they need so that they can minister and teach and help develop our students.
Well, that's a good entryway into my next question. So what are some of the things that you're finding the principals of the schools that you're working with, what are they working on? What are their challenges? What's kind of your insight into the health of the Catholic school system? What's just happening and what are their needs? What are their strengths and what can we work on?
A lot of strengths. The Diocese of Youngstown has some outstanding schools, really great leaders that are doing really innovative and great things for our area and for our community. Ed Choice, the scholarship program from the state, it certainly has made Catholic education, it's put it within reach of a lot of families, but it also has brought in a lot of families who maybe don't have as much exposure, not just to the Catholic faith, but to Catholic schooling in particular. They know they want something different for their kids, but they're not sure what the new setting will mean. So we're having to do some work there to impart our vision. The Catholic understanding of education is it's a partnership with the family. But as with any partnerships, you got to navigate the exact, parameters of that. And so we're doing a lot of that work. I think one of the other things that I'm really working on is I think there's a strange tension. Maybe it's everywhere, but I've only experienced it here in Ohio. I think our Catholic schools are deeply integrated into their local communities. It's not like our schools just started opening a few years ago. We've been around for generations.
Yeah.
There's some hostility, I think, being directed at private schools and Catholic schools among them when I want to stand up and say, look, this is not the issue, right? We've been around a long time where they know what we do. I want to work with my friends who are in the public school system or other Catholic school systems or other Christian school systems, for instance.
Yeah.
We're not in the same line of work. I'm in Catholic formation, but I want our schools to be seen as not just great educational options, but great members of their community more broadly.
Yeah. Can I clarify on that? So you're saying hostility coming from the schools towards other public schools?
No, I mean, there's a lawsuit now about Ed Choice, for instance. And so, people are reading in the paper, oh, look, private schools are getting a bunch of state money while public schools aren't getting a raise or something like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is based on misunderstanding, frankly. The evidence is very clear that a lot of private schools, Catholic schools especially, do great work in their community. They serve a lot of people and give parents options in education. You can oppose vouchers if you want to, but we should all be in favor of options in education.
Right.
Because different kids have different learning needs. So I'm trying to beat the drum that says, hey, we're all in this together, and Catholic schools don't stand apart from all of this.
Yeah.
We are dedicated to the well-being of the communities around us.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that, this sense of hostility, because I'm skipping ahead a little bit with this question, but it does feel like our culture, our world is becoming increasingly hostile to Christianity, people of the Christian faith. And this ed choice issue is a perfect example of that because we're not trying to take over education and replace public education, but
Right.
we're being attacked simply for existing. And it starts out as people saying that there needs to be like options, like you're saying, like they want a public education, they don't want their kids to be taught
Right.
Christian things, and then all of a sudden it shifts to there should be no Christianity or whatever at all.
Right.
People start attacking that, and all I can think is just that there is spiritual warfare. It is a real thing. There are evil forces out there that want to attack the church. They want to attack schools. They don't want this out there, and they work in these insidious and really treacherous ways. I feel that it's the same thing with the abortion debate. It's not about killing a child, it's about choice. So it's this lie. It becomes about this freedom, and then all of a sudden it's not so much just about freedom, it's actually about anti-Christianity, anti-Catholicism.
I think there's certainly an element of that in people's experience. My own take on the general antagonism is a little bit different. I mean, I understand what you're saying and certainly can point to and experience it, particularly in the abortion debate. But my own take here is that, look, people don't like to be told no. And for too long, they have perceived the Christian church, and the Catholic Church especially, because we've always been on the right side of issues, in my judgment, but
Me as well.
they see us as only saying no. I think some of that is on us, right? I think there's a real opportunity, but also an obligation to present the beauty of the church's teaching, for instance, with regard to human sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Let's present it in the beauty that it comes in.
Yeah.
The church says yes to lots of wonderful things that contribute to human thriving, but we only get in the paper when we say no to something.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the hostility you're talking about, I think that's where you see it, is in the people who want to present the church's, human sexuality, for instance, is a complex topic, and the church's teaching here is nuanced and rich and beautiful. But, that's not a headline. The headline is church says no. I think that's what I love about schools, is that we have an opportunity, because I have kids in my building for much longer than, a typical 5-minute conversation or something.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the opportunity to talk about the beauty of the church's teaching and all of its rich complexity. And people can walk away from that saying, okay, I may not be on board with everything, but man, they really have an understanding and a vision for human thriving. Really want people to be happy. That's a great thing. That's what I say to Catholic parents all the time who are like, why should I put my kids in Catholic school?
Yeah.
That's what I say, because it only really works the richer and the more depth you dive into. That's when you discover the resources that get you through those hard times in life. That's what Catholic schools have to offer.
I feel that we've been culturally defensive. We've been trying to say, no, not that, no, not this, instead of having an apostolic vision. And that's one of the things that Pope Francis, may he rest in peace, has brought to the church with Evangelii Gaudium. For example, the joy of the gospel, going out and sharing the gospel, puts us not in I don't want to say, the opposite of defensive is offensive, but being active and being approachable and going to people and trying to share that. Because as you're saying, yes, it's sharing a vision for humanity. It's not just a restriction of humanity. It's a challenge, because of course it's a challenge, because the life that we want to present is more difficult. It is a more difficult life to be more holy. But this is one thing that people who want to misconstrue the words of Jesus always say, is that, Jesus came to show us love and all this. Yes, that's true, in giving us a way to be free of the burden of sin, not to just be free of the punishment of sin, but to remove the stain of sin from our lives and to live free of that. And it's a different kind of freedom, because it's not a freedom of, oh, you can do whatever you want. And I believe this was Pope St. John Paul II who said about the United States that a lot of people misconstrue freedom for license. And those are two very different things. And that's a whole other conversation that we could get into.
I like everything you just said there. I think that's right on. And I think Pope Benedict and Pope John Paul II, both of those guys were willing to step into any room and talk.
Mm-hmm.
I think Benedict in particular is underestimated. I mean, he was a world-class intellect.
Oh,
and
yes.
never afraid to sit down with anybody at any table and talk about any topic. That's like when you're steeped in the faith, you
Mm-hmm.
can do that, you know?
Yes. Unfortunately, I think he was following one of the most charismatic men in modern history with Pope John Paul II. And Pope Benedict was, as you say, a genius of theology. And then, of course, around that time was when the scandals started to break, the sexual abuse scandals. And he was very tainted in his reputation by that, I think, as well, unfortunately. But as you say, I mean, he was a brilliant theologian.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And everybody in the academy would have said that. You know, I mean, he had his detractors, sure, but everybody recognized the first-class intellect. We've kind of gone far afield, so let's get back to school.
That's the sign of a good conversation, I like to think. But you kind of started to discuss this in your answer to my previous question, but what do you find to be most impactful about a Catholic education, and why is it a good thing for families to choose?
The answer there for me is one word. It's depth. Depth, right? Like I said, very grateful for my upbringing and my public school. I had wonderful teachers. They cared about us, but you know, they were, and probably for good reason, there were things they couldn't say and lessons they couldn't teach. And another way that I would say that is there were resources for getting through the difficult points in life that they could not offer me or show me, even if they wanted to. And I know some of them did, because I grew up in Texas and it's a different kind of environment down there. Teachers say things in public schools all the time that they probably could get in trouble for. But in a Catholic school, the depth is all there. And not every kid's going to swim all the way to the bottom, of course. But, you know, everybody gets a little bit more than they would if they weren't there. And that's what makes it rich. That's how you get through the hard times. You know, you experience loss, you experience setback, and you got to draw on faith. And the deeper you've been in the faith, the more resources you're going to find to get you through to that rich experience that's at the basis of all of it. Depth is the word.
So as you say, you know, you're going to experience challenges and loss in life, and having that well-developed appreciation for your faith and for spirituality is a huge benefit to moving through life and keeping your integrity while doing so. I'm curious about the experience of our students in today's world. Talked a little bit about the challenges that Catholic schools face, but what about the students? What are they going through in this, you know, increasingly secular environment? What are their challenges, and how are you seeing them overcome those challenges?
The most obvious challenge is they live in a digital world that has no concept of either self-control or delayed gratification. I can see any clip, anytime, for as many times as I want. Like, there's no limit on that kind of stuff. I fall victim to that. Sometimes I'm scrolling through YouTube and suddenly I realize it's 1:30 in the morning. I've been sitting there for 2.5 hours, you know. What that does, you know, I'm all for a little brain rot here and there, but what that does long term is just makes you always wonder what else is out there. You're just going down a rabbit hole. So I think what our students are dealing with is just a shallow experience of everything. They have a broader exposure than I ever had, but it's much less deep. And therefore, a lot of them are just kind of riding the waves here. To torture that metaphor a little more. I mean, they're just kind of like whatever, just bouncing from one thing in life to the next, just as they do from one clip to the next on YouTube or TikTok or whatever. Personally, I'm not even anti those platforms. Like, I've never seen TikTok, but I don't mind the platforms. I don't like what I see them doing to students. So that's one thing. Our schools and all schools should be doing this. Like, we have to teach sustained attention to one thing. That's critically important. I think another thing that a lot of them are dealing with is hopelessness. I meet way too many 16 and 17-year-olds who are not optimistic about their future at all.
Yeah,
They're looking forward to being done with school, but they're not optimistic about their future.
What do you think is the cause of that?
Yeah, I think about that a lot, actually. I think there's bad models often that are put in front of them. I think there's this incredible pressure to look successful, happy, whatever the right term is there. And therefore, when that doesn't happen, you can get this kind of constant defeated about yourself.
Well, yeah, that's a great word to use for that too, yeah.
I'm trying to find ways to challenge that, which is hard in school because school is all about grade. I'm going to tell you how well you did here. So that's a challenge, but it's a challenge that gets me up in the morning. It's a challenge that's worth facing.
As you mentioned, the constant exposure to so many people, I don't think people have a good concept of what a normal life is anymore.
Right.
I heard recently that the number of people whose career aspiration is to be an influencer was like one of the top choices.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, I just want to like just take me back to the 1950s or something. Like, just in my opinion, being an influencer sounds like one of the most depressing existences I could imagine. It's this total facade constantly.
What I notice about all of that, though, is like the influencers that I see out there, it's all about self-aggrandizement. It's all about self-fulfillment.
Yeah.
Right? Like influence is great, but I'm trying to influence people to live for something larger than how many clicks they got or how good they look in a photo. There's more to life than this. And unfortunately, I think for a lot of our kids, they don't even realize that.
Yeah.
When I get depressed, that's what I get depressed about. It's just this sense that I'm fighting a battle maybe I can't win, but needs to be fought because I just meet way too many kids who aren't optimistic and hopeful about their future.
Yeah. Well, let me give you a little antidote here because I feel the same way many times, but I also am instantly encouraged because it reminds me of why the church has survived for 2,000 years, and it's because it works. This depth that you're talking about is the antidote to the shallowness that you're seeing. It is the antidote to the hopelessness that you're seeing, and that's why it remains ever new. I know that phrase has been used countless times, and I don't even know who originated it, but the church is ever new because it is what our human life is about. And looking at as you know, like coming over from, the Protestant side, there is a richness to the Catholic tradition that it's not just academic, it's not just tradition, it's not just religiosity, it's a holistic view of human life that's very well integrated, I find, and very empowering to what a human being is. We are designed to worship. And if we're not worshiping God, we're worshiping something. It's either our possessions, it's ourselves, it's our self-image. Any of those things could be the thing that we're worshiping. By placing that in its healthy stage or in its healthy environment, it becomes a good thing. I think that there's a reason that the church continues to survive, and it's because it's how we're meant to exist. It's how we're meant to live. And so these challenges will come up. It's very difficult for us in those times. And I think we're at this inflection point, culturally speaking, where we're facing a lot of challenges. But at the same time, Gen Z, as we're seeing, is becoming increasingly traditional. It's becoming increasingly religious. The trend is changing a bit. I don't want to say that it's done, like we've accomplished it, but we're seeing people become aware of that hunger that they have for something deeper and starting to take steps towards it. So I think as challenging as it is right now, we're also on the precipice of a new renaissance for faith as well. So that's what keeps me going.
Right. I appreciate that encouragement. You reminded me of a homily I heard once where the pastor was reflecting on the story of Abraham and Isaac, and in particular when Abraham goes to sacrifice Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the pastor saying, for parents, we're just aghast at this. We can't believe this moment.
Yeah.
But the reality is, he said, every parent sacrifices their kid's life on some altar. It might be your ego, it might be athletics, it might be academics, but you dedicate your kid's life to some altar. Make sure it's the right one. That has stuck with me I heard that sermon almost 30 years ago, and I think about it weekly.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that because I have a 6-month-old. Excuse me, she just turned 7 months. And, it's very powerful to hear because there's so much worry that you have about putting her in the right direction and how do I give her this faith, and just thinking about that, like, you're not going to get through life unscathed. No one is. So it's about preparing her as best as I can. And will I be 100% successful? No, of course not. And no one is, but it's just choosing the right path. And, if you point her in the direction of God. It's not going to be the wrong path. For sure. So thank you for sharing that as well.
Yeah.
So last couple of questions here about our Catholic schools. We've talked a little bit about the challenges that the schools and the students are facing. You mentioned earlier that the difference with Catholic education is that you see it as a partnership between the school and the parents. So what are some things that parents and our parishioners around the diocese can do to best support our Catholic schools and our students?
Yeah, so the first thing is buy into the vision, right? A lot of Catholics don't go to Catholic schools, and that's fine. But recognize the richness that is out there for your kids and give us a look, especially Catholic parents who are maybe, because they live nearby or this school has a really fantastic, athletic program or arts program or something, a public school there. But give the Catholic schools a look because the evidence is super clear. The two things that really impact whether or not a student practices the faith when they are adults and out on their own are the example provided by their parents. That's first and foremost, their dads in particular, believe it or not.
Yes.
But also, how deep was their exposure to the faith? And Mass squeezed in on a Saturday night or Sunday morning, like it's great, it is, it's wonderful, it's necessary. But the deeper you expose the kid to the faith, the more likely that they'll have experiences that keep them coming back, right?
Yeah.
So give Catholic schools a look. The second thing I would say, Ohio, as you said at the top of the interview, I've only been in Ohio less than a year. There's this thing called the SGO, the Scholarship Granting Organization in Ohio. And it had to be explained to me 2 or 3 times when I moved here because it sounded too good to be true. I kept thinking, clearly I'm missing something. Every taxpayer in Ohio can earmark part of their Ohio state tax for Catholic schools. And it doesn't cost you anything. It's not even, it's free money because you get it all back because it's a tax credit, not a deduction.
Right.
It's a brilliant idea. I would love for every Catholic family out there to do that. And if we got even 15% of the Catholic families in Ohio to do that, we would have the money to provide so many more resources, so many more opportunities for our kids.
Yeah.
And it's literally free money. I'm telling you, I had to have people explain it to me a couple of times because I was like, clearly I'm missing something. There's no way this is right. And it is right.
Wow.
So look up Good Samaritan Scholarship Fund. Look it up.
Well, that leads us nicely to the last thing I wanted to ask. Are there any upcoming projects or events in regards to our Catholic schools that you'd like to share with our audience or anything that you want to make them aware of?
We're here at the end of a school year, so it's time for some celebrations. But I'm really excited about something we're doing next year. There's this really powerful passage in the book of Jeremiah where the prophet, he's talking to the people of Israel, and they're in exile at that moment. And he says, pray for the welfare of the city you are in. And remember, they're in exile, right? So they're in enemy territory as far as they're concerned. He says, pray for the welfare of the city you're in, because in the city's welfare, you find your own welfare. And our theme next year for the Catholic schools in our diocese is going to be pray for the welfare of the city you're in. Let's highlight the great things that are happening around us that we are part of. So we're going to be looking at our service projects. We're going to be looking at some of the things that our Catholic school graduates have done to say, hey, we're in this with you. It's a challenging time in northeastern Ohio. And I mean for our schools to help lead in the reemergence of this area because the people are awesome. They're tough. They're gritty people. And I mean for our schools to lead in the resurgence of northeastern Ohio.
Well, that sounds like a beautiful vision for the future of our Catholic schools here in the Diocese of Youngstown. So we'll end on that note. Stephen, thank you so much for being with us today. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your insights and your experience. And thank you for letting us know what we can do to help make our Catholic schools a success.
Thank you. I hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Catholic Echo podcast. To hear our previous episodes and to find more information, please go to catholicecho.org.
The Catholic Echo podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Your host is Collin Vogt. Have a blessed day, and may God be with you.